Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman. And in this week's podcast, I'm really happy to be talking with Cindy, who is an expert in intuitive eating. Now, a lot of people hear intuitive eating and understand that it means eat whatever you want. And by that, they understand that whatever you want equals a whole load of sugar. And as I told Cindy on this episode, in the past, I invited several intuitive eating experts to talk to me on my podcast, and they all turned me down. So in this podcast, Cindy explains what intuitive eating means for her and why she didn't turn me down. We'll get to our chat in just a minute. But first, I just wanted to tell you that if you're looking for some free resources, then I have plenty for you. First, download my 5 tips to get rid of cravings. And those 5 tips may not be what you think they are. So go to aftersugarclub.com and download your 5 tips today. Come check out the Life After Sugar Facebook page and subscribe to the Life After Sugar YouTube channel, as well as my Instagram account at My Life After Sugar, which is where you'll get all kinds of inspiration so that you can see that it's perfectly possible to live a happy and active life, even if you don't eat sugar. You can also check out my TikTok account at Netta_lifeaftersugar. All right, so here's my chat about intuitive eating with Cindy. All right, I'm here with Cindy. And Cindy, can you tell us a little bit about your own background with food and especially with sugar?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me as a guest on your podcast. I'm really excited to be here. And my story is really related to sports. I started swimming competitively when I was 10 years old. And at that time, you don't really think about what you're eating because you're just swimming so much. At 10 years, I was swimming 3 times a week, and that very quickly built up to 9 times a week,
Whoa.
along with weight training. And so, your metabolism's high and you're eating all the foods that you want to eat. You're not thinking about good foods versus bad foods or carbs. You're just eating whatever is presented to you. And I grew up in a household where all of the food were made. There was the occasional pizza on Friday night, but it was never labeled as good or bad. Treats were usually homemade cookies or cakes or pies, but it wasn't anything that was overly indulgent. It was just dessert after a meal. And I think what changed for me was as I started to hit puberty and you start to notice, now looking back on it, there's so many things that are going on, right? Like your body's changing. You're starting to notice boys. You're starting to have boys notice you. You're starting to see how or what body shapes are getting more attention from the boys that you like. And so for me, it wasn't so much of the sugar per se, it was just what bodies looked like. Like, oh, so that's what gets the most attention is maybe the smaller girls, the girls that were doing the cross country running or playing volleyball. And I was swimming, so I was developing, lots of muscles in my shoulders and I was getting more muscular. And I started to think I'm the quote unquote bigger girl, even though I was very athletic. And during that time, so now that's happening. And then I had a swim coach who started doing, we did weigh-ins and we did fat analysis. and you start comparing your numbers to your best friends who's on the swim team. So I started comparing my body to other people and knowing if they were faster or slower than me, what that meant. And we also started tracking our calories. So I didn't know what a calorie was,
Hmm.
but then I quickly learned like I started this encyclopedia in my head. I knew the calories of all the different foods I was eating and how many calories I should be eating. At the time, we didn't know, how much carbs or fat or protein or sugar we should be consuming, nor did we know how much we were burning. Like this was, early 90s, really. So, I mean, we weren't even fueling our bodies before an hour and a half workout. Like
Hmm.
you just wouldn't hear of that now. And so your body is changing so much, but you're also being told what you can and cannot eat.
Yeah.
Like you cannot have that ice cream. You cannot eat this. And so for me, it was the labeling of food. And it was like, well, that's bad. You can't have ice cream. You can't have chocolate. And so my list of allowed foods and restricted foods grew exponentially because of what I was being told and of what I wanted my body to look like. So it
Uh-huh.
became very distorted at a very young age, but I didn't know any different because that's what everybody else was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And was it all about calories that the you can't, you're not allowed?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, we didn't have calorie tracking apps, but there was ways that you could, like there were books that you would look up how many calories. Oh my gosh, I'm really dating myself right now. But you could look up the different foods. And so you knew that a banana had less calories than a chocolate bar. So it wasn't so much the sugar, it was just that food's not allowed because it had too many calories. It was all about calories. And then the fat-free thing started as well. So that, all of a sudden it was like, oh, you can have these things because they're fat-free, but they were still loaded with sugar. They still affected your body. Um, so I never really got a chance to start having a good relationship with food because once I was starting to allow myself, or I was at that age where I could make decisions on what I could eat, those that option to make those decisions was almost taken away from me because my brain had developed these rules.
Hmm.
And again, I didn't know. I didn't know that this was restricted eating. I didn't know that I was starting to experience body dysmorphia because I look at pictures of me back then when I was like 13, 14 years old, again, swimming 9 times a week.
Yeah.
And I always thought I was just this like gigantic person. Like I kept thinking I was like these massive shoulders and this huge girl compared to my friends who weren't swimmers. I wasn't. I was little, but my brain was telling me because of the foods that I was eating or the muscles that I had, I was big. And so no one's talking about it, but like there's restricted eating happening, there's body dysmorphia happening, and then there's just this dislike of your body because it's not the way you think it should look because you're not getting the attention from the opposite sex because you don't you don't look the way that the other girls do, or you think in your mind that you don't. So
Yeah.
all of that was just having a really negative effect. And so it was just massive food restriction and massive dieting restriction, which included sweets and treats because those were a big no-no because they had so many calories in them.
Yeah. And you were saying that you didn't know what calories were. Did anyone explain to you what calories were?
No,
Okay.
no, like that's the interesting thing. It was just you need to be eating less or be eating less calorie, high caloric foods. But no one was explaining to us like that calories are fuel. Like you need to have this fuel. I mean, you are swimming so much and you're training so much and you're doing all this strength training. I mean, I can't even imagine now going for an hour and a half swim, swimming, about 5 kilometers with water. That's all we had. Like
Mm-hmm.
no one was telling us that we needed fuel to fuel our bodies. We were just being told you need to eat less because that way you'll be leaner and you'll go faster. So, I mean, it was a known thing amongst a lot of swimmers of eating disorders,
Yeah.
but nobody talked about it because it was more, oh, look how fast they are, look how small they are, versus, oh my gosh, that poor girl is struggling, but no one's helping her.
And were
It was
you
really uncommon.
struggling? I'm sorry. Were you struggling?
I was. I was. I wouldn't say, looking back on it now, I wasn't, I know I wasn't anorexic, but I definitely had disordered eating. I kind of came to that realization just a few years ago on my own journey to having a better relationship with food because I never really got a chance to develop one. And when I look back, I was like, what 12-year-old should be counting calories and getting fat analysis done and getting weigh-ins and having, your food journal checked and hating her body and having nobody even knew what, at least I didn't know what body dysmorphia was. And that went on for decades. I mean, literally decades that I struggled, but it never really been identified. I didn't see a nutritionist, and the only eating disorders that people talked about were, anorexia or bulimia. Like you'd see it like in an after school special or in a movie, but nobody talked about disordered eating. And I had no idea that I was struggling with that for so long.
Uh-huh. And when did you actually get understand the distinction between eating disorders and disordered eating? Because it sounds very similar.
It does. Yeah. It wasn't, my gosh, it was only a couple of years ago. I was burning, what is it? I was burning the candle at both ends. I was in a very high stressful job in medical device sales, which really hit the stress level during COVID, as you can imagine, working in the ICU and working in the emergency department with so many sick people. Um, I was always type A. That's why I was great at competitive sports. So I was always pushing to, exceed my sales quotas. I was making President's Club, but I was so stressed that way. And I was struggling internally because I still hated my body. My weight would go up and down, and I was never happy with how I looked. I eventually came to a breaking point where I was crying on a daily basis. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm so unhappy. And so I quit my job and said, I need to get a handle on this food issue. My husband was very supportive, and he was like, do you need to talk to somebody? Like, what do you need? Do you need to read books? And I didn't know. And so I went into the health coaching field because I thought there's got to be something here that can help me. And, it's one of those moments where you're not really looking for something, but it finds you. And I loved health coaching. I went through IIN, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, the Institute of Integrated Nutrition.
Mhm.
But while I was in that program, I think I was just kind of Googling some stuff. I'm not even sure how it happened. And I came across intuitive eating. And I'd heard about it from a couple of not influencers, but some women that I followed on Instagram that were very body positive. And I was doing their Pilates and their yoga during COVID because everything was closed.
Mhm.
And they had talked about this intuitive eating. And I thought, okay, I'm going to check this out. And I got the book, started reading it, and it just clicked. I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I have been looking for. And also, oh my gosh, they are describing, there are different personalities, obviously, that intuitive eating discusses, but I just checked every box for food anxiety, food stress, disordered eating. And I'm not one to self-diagnose myself, but I was like, come on, like this, I think I found my people. And so as I learned more about it, I realized what I had been struggling with for so long, but never had labeled. And I started to explore my story. I started to look back, like, where did my food rules come from? Why do I have this fear of certain foods? Why do I feel so anxious if I eat something? what things were said to me to help me create these limiting beliefs. And as I unraveled those, I started to heal my relationship with food. And it was a process. It's not, I'm going to flip the switch and I'm just going to eat whatever I want, which I think unfortunately, those that don't know about intuitive eating, I hear some people say, oh, that would be amazing that I can just eat whatever I want and not feel guilty. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the end goal. There's work that, and I put in the work. I did the workbook. I became certified because I was so passionate about this because I could feel the change in my body. I could feel the change mentally of the healing that was happening, but it takes time. Like you've got to go deep and figure out, where did these rules come from? Why do I have these beliefs? What are the things that are triggering me? And for so long, I, for example, would not allow certain foods in the house because I thought I didn't have willpower. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, whether they don't have willpower, I'm going to say air quotes, willpower, um, around certain foods. And so I thought, out of sight, out of mind. But then all I needed to do, even though I would throw stuff in the garbage. I would throw stuff in the garbage and I would literally put dishwashing soap on it so that I wouldn't be tempted to take it back out of the garbage.
Mhm.
Um, as long as it didn't look too disgusting. But then I would just go to the grocery store and I would walk past that aisle and I'd be like, "Ugh, I don't have the willpower." And I'd beat myself up and I'd throw it in my cart.
Yeah.
And so kind of fast forwarding, but I'm at the point now where those trigger foods I can keep in my house now and they don't trigger me. Like I could never have, for example, chocolate chips in the house or
Mhm.
peanut butter because I mean, peanut butter and chocolate, it's a beautiful combination.
Well,
But if it was in the house, I had to eat it. I didn't know how to control myself. But I learned going through the intuitive eating process, really listening to my body and finding out like, do I really want this right now? How does that make me feel after I eat it?
I want to take a quick break to say that if this is your first time here, then welcome and thank you for listening to this podcast. And whether you're new or a regular and you haven't yet rated or reviewed this podcast, could I ask you to scroll down and tap on the stars to rate this podcast and also to write a short review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. I love reading your reviews, and when you rate and review this podcast, not only does it encourage me to continue making new episodes, but it also helps to share this podcast and have more people see it so that we can help more people feel better and lose weight with less sugar. So again, thank you for rating and reviewing this podcast and for spreading the word about sugar.
Because I also love red licorice. I mean, it's my favorite. And I think, honestly, I think it became one of my favorite foods because it was labeled as fat-free back in the day. So I
Yeah.
thought, oh, this is okay. No one was talking about the sugar content. It
Mhm.
was the fat, right? So I was like, it's okay to have licorice. It's fine. But I knew if I ate a lot of that sugar, my stomach felt horrible. I get a wickedly bad headache. And I felt like I couldn't stop. I
Yeah.
would keep eating it and eating it. And I wasn't eating it for, there's no pleasure and there was no satisfaction. And then eventually I was like, I would feel terrible about myself because I was eating it. And then I'd have to throw in the garbage. And then the cycle would start all over again the next time I went to the store.
Yeah.
But now, if I have it in the house for some reason, maybe we wanted to have a movie night and I wanted to have some of it. I am at the point now, and this is not something that was easy to do. It did take some work. I can have a couple of pieces. I can feel satisfied. And I know if I was to eat more, my body's not going to feel good. I'm not respecting my body. It's not that I'm restricting myself. It's not that I have developed the willpower. It's knowing what I eat and how it makes me feel.
Yeah,
And that's
that's
really been the most important thing for me.
all right. And that is a huge mindset shift. It's a complete change, a 180 in the premise for why you're behaving as you are or why you're eating what you're eating. And
Hmm.
as far as I understand it, for intuitive eating, contrary to what most people may believe, which is you just eat whatever, whatever quantities, whatever, it's more about how do I want to feel rather than which food can I or am I allowed to eat? Is that right?
Yes, this whole premise of I'm, good foods, bad foods, or I'm allowed to eat this or I'm not allowed to eat that. How does anybody know what you're allowed to eat unless it's you, right? Like only you know. And what I feel, the best way I describe it is we have this amazing supercomputer inside of our bodies. And at some point along the way, and again, everyone's experience is different, and that's why exploring your story is so important. But somewhere along the way, these food rules have developed, these restrictions, this food police voice in your head that says you don't deserve to eat that or you can't eat that. And we need to unlearn that. We need to rewire our brains to understand what foods make us feel good, like really listening to our body, because we're not listening to it. When we just shovel this food in our face and we're not getting any pleasure or satisfaction, we're not listening to our hunger and fullness cues. We're not listening. It just, there's no connection. There's no connection between the brain and the stomach. And
Yeah.
where that disconnection happened and why is so personalized and it's so individualized for everyone's experience. It's just really important to take the time to do that work before you get to the point where you can eat something for pleasure and not feel that guilt or that anxiety with the food. That was a huge turning point for me was the listening, to the point where that's not my business now that I started called Écoutez Wellness, ECOUTAY. Écoutez means to listen. I played around with the spelling a little bit,
Yeah,
but
that's to listen in French,
it's
right?
listening to your body, and it's also being heard, so that when you tell somebody your story or you're working with somebody, your feelings, your story, those rules, they feel very real to you. And it takes time to unlearn those rules and understand that they're doing more harm than good.
Yeah, wow. And that is really what I do as well in my program, the Freedom from Cravings Formula program, because, yeah, as you're saying, and as a teacher, I can tell you this, unlearning something is far more difficult than learning something new. And doing both
Mhm.
at the same time is like, you probably, need a helping hand for that if you're, because it's just a difficult process. And even realizing that all this internal chatter that you have in your head or these beliefs that you have are not necessarily true out there, but they feel very true inside. And
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah, and it's the thing with sugar, right? What I found for people like myself, um, is that we'd love to be intuitive eaters for sugar, but for our type of brain, the sugar itself, or sweet tastes at least, and for some people like me, salty, crunchy, man-made things, they hijack our ability to feel the intuitive yes or no, how do I want to feel? It's like we spin out of control when we eat certain types of foods, of which sugar.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think it's really important to know that everybody's experience with food is different. So whether intuitive eating works for you or not, or maybe some other, and I don't want to use the word diet or restriction, but some other food journey, I think it's important to understand that everyone's is different. And sometimes, I can appreciate that if you are someone who is struggling, it's hard to know, well, which path is the best for me. That's that's part of the journey, is figuring that out. And just because your friend might think that paleo is the best thing for them, and another friend says that the Mediterranean diet is the best for them, or intuitive eating is the best for them, or no sugar is the best for them. Everyone is so individualized. I think it's important to understand those different approaches to food, be respectful of them, but also be curious, not judgmental.
Yeah.
And I remember that from watching Ted Lasso. I think there was a scene where he's like, be curious, not judgmental, when he was playing darts or something like that. And I thought that was so good because, if you're curious about different approaches to food, then you're more open-minded to explore those possibilities or those options until you find the right fit. And so I like to keep an open mind with all things until either I've experimented with myself or I've done my due diligence and done my research. But I love that there's multiple approaches to food. It's just whichever one works best for your body.
Yeah, I just love that approach. And that's what made us click together, because I know
Mhm.
you're in the intuitive eating space, and I've invited several nutritionists or experts in intuitive eating. And apart from you, I think they all turned me down. So thank you for not doing that. There
I'm
goes your.
so glad you asked.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you're open-minded enough, because the responses I had from the intuitive eating space was, no, we don't agree, Netta, with your approach of not allowing sugar. And I'm like, did I ever say that? Slash, did you ever listen to my podcast? Like,
Mhm.
I never said that. You never say that. Who says that? You know? It it felt like nobody was listening. And
Mhm.
so I'm happy to have met you, because I feel that you listen, not just me, this is fine, but to this way that to this reality that we're all different.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for me personally, I I do, like, I will be completely honest, I do not live a no sugar life, but I also know, because I feel like I'm more in tune with my body every single day. I know how I feel if I eat sugar. I can't deny that. I know if I eat, especially like the candy, I will feel ill. I will have a headache. I won't feel good. And I know that it's not the fuel that I need to keep up with the active lifestyle that I have that brings me joy. Like, I would not eat a bunch of sugar and then go for a run, because then my run's going to feel terrible. So
Mhm.
why do that to my body? But if for other people who are pursuing a no sugar lifestyle because of how that sugar affects their bodies, then I don't feel it's my place to say that they're doing something wrong. Because if that's making them feel good, then that, at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, right? So I would love I absolutely feel so passionate. I love supporting women who want to pursue an intuitive eating diet, and who are, I don't want to, sorry, I don't know why I'm using the word diet, but to pursue intuitive eating. Sorry, it's that diet mentality in the back of my
Yeah.
brain is still there. Um, or if they're just curious about it, like maybe they're thinking, you know what, I don't know if I want to go completely sugar free, but maybe intuitive eating might be for me, or maybe something else would be good. So you have to kind of test the waters on different things to find what works for your body. Because if we were all the same, like, just think how boring the world would be.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And it's like people assume that life after sugar, which is like, the name of this podcast and my approach, is about no sugar whatsoever, ever, the rest of your life forever.
Mm,
And I'm like, did I ever say that? Like, it is what works best for you.
mhm.
Sometimes figuring out what works best and how you want to feel is a long, long, long process, Because for most of us, no one's ever asked us, how do you want to feel? Or even how do you actually feel? So it's like this whole discovery. And I work with women generally over 50, and
Mhm.
only at that age are we beginning to actually ask ourselves, how do I want to feel?
Yeah. And it's crazy, right? Because look how many decades that we have lived, and I'm getting close to that age bracket as well. Whether I like it or not, I'm not quite sure if I'm ready to go there, but it's coming, so I'm embracing it.
It's a lovely
Um,
decade.
that's what I've heard. It's lovely. So I can't wait to join the group. Um, but that's more than half our life that we've been living with different rules or restrictions or not feeling great in our body. I mean, I'm so thankful that we are in this age right now of wellness and figuring out what works best for our bodies. Um, it's unfortunate that we couldn't have done this sooner, but the fact that people are taking advantage of this now and they are embracing it and saying, for far too long, I haven't felt good, whether it's, they've got a bad gut or they get headaches or they don't feel good when they're exercising. It's time that we say, what can we do to make ourselves feel better? And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation because the more that people know about the different options that are out there, it's not, you can read one book and it's going to work for everybody. It's not the case. We're all so different. You just need to be open-minded, be curious, not judgmental.
Yeah, I love that. Be curious, not judgmental. Wow. I love
Wonderful.
your approach, really.
Thank you.
I think we're very complementary. And thank you, Cindy, for talking to us today and for clarifying what intuitive actually means for eating, because as you were saying, and sometimes I find this in the intermittent fasting world as well, there's this approach of eat whatever you like. And people interpret that in 101 different ways. And
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
always say, well, if you want to eat what you like, then maybe change what you like, and then you can eat whatever you like.
Yeah, yeah. But I think I'm so glad that you mentioned that because it is, nothing. There is no quick fix. There is, if you have rules or restrictions or your body isn't feeling good, there is going to be some unlearning as we relearn whatever approach it is that you take. And so if you hear something, it's such a common um, misunderstanding that that intuitive eating is that you can eat whatever you want. Even just saying that out loud, I'm like, that sounds a little odd. Do the research. Definitely, if you want, you can Google intuitive eating. I would love to have a conversation with you. You can check out my website, but that is the end goal. There's 10 principles. They're not steps, but there are 10 principles as you go along. And the goal is to be able to eat what you like without food guilt and anxiety and have it for satisfaction and pleasure. But you need to put in some time and then put in some work. And whether you do it solo or you do it with someone like myself, um, I can say with personal experience, it has changed my life. I am a much happier, less stressed, more relaxed person, and my relationship with food has done a complete 180. So
Same, same,
very
yes.
thankful.
Yeah, fantastic. And eat whatever you want or whatever you like can or may not include sugar, and that's not the point.
Exactly. Yep. Well
Interesting.
said.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you too, Netta. It was a pleasure.
Oh, I'm so happy to have found Cindy because she and I are on the same page when it comes to intuitive eating. And by intuitive, as you heard, we mean respecting how certain foods make you feel. And the problem with sugar is that it often hijacks this ability to be intuitive. Because many of us have had a lifetime of eating sugary foods without even thinking. It's not your fault. These foods are made. They're manufactured and engineered by the processed foods industry to make you crave them. And when you're craving, you're not thinking or feeling. So, as we were saying in our chat, it's a huge mindset shift to go from how can I stop this craving to how do I want to feel? And yes, this mindset shift is much easier said than done, which is why I created the Freedom from Cravings Formula program. If you want to feel free from cravings and in control around sugar, then here's how to do it. First, go to the description along with this episode and click on the link to book a clarity call with me. Or just go to aftersugarclub.com and click on the big green button, Book a Clarity Call. That's the first step, because then we'll get to talk together to see how the Freedom from Cravings Formula program can help you. The Freedom from Cravings Formula program is specifically designed by me, with my 10 years of experience living sugar-free, to help you get rid of cravings so that you can slim down and finally feel in control around food, especially sugar. In the program, you'll get step-by-step guidance and customized support through the 5-step formula that I've developed to help you get control over cravings so that you can finally live your life with more energy and fit into your favorite clothes effortlessly and feel confident in your food choices so that you can ditch the shame and embarrassment that you feel every time your emotions make you slip or fall off the wagon, and so that you never feel like you're on some kind of a restrictive diet. If you're at the stage of your life where you're finally ready to look after yourself, let's chat. You can hop on a free clarity call with me at any time by going to aftersugarclub.com and clicking on the big green button, Book a Clarity Call. We'll have a quick 30-minute one-on-one chat where you'll be able to tell me more about your challenges and goals, and we'll be able to see how the Freedom from Cravings Formula program can help you. So go to aftersugarclub.com. Speak soon. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.